mistake. Empathy is not weak or woke. And by the way, woke just means you give a damn about other people. We must not isolate. We must stay in community. We must help the vulnerable. We must find ways to project an inspiring vision of the future.
Stand up.
Yeah, I agree. Legendary actor and activist Jane Fonda at the SAG Awards last night in Los Angeles. Hello and welcome to another episode of Stand Up. We are off here on a Monday. Hello to all of my friends out there and listener land, wherever you're listening. Thanks for taking me along with you. I hope that you had a good weekend. I've got lots to get to, as I always do here on today's episode. Can't do it without you, so thank you to everyone who listens and pays for a subscription, supports the work here. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Yeah, I've got David Rothkopf joining me today, and it's a great conversation. That is coming up at about 33 minutes into the show today. Also, I will host a hangout tonight at 8 East. Also, if you're listening early this morning, I'll be on the Stephanie Miller Show at 10 a.m. East, which is very exciting for me. It's a huge show and great promotion for this show, so hopefully that goes well. You can watch my appearance on the Australia's Today Show as well as Laura Coates' show on Thursday night. It's been busy for me. I went down to Maryland and talked to a whole bunch of amazing education support professionals down in Maryland over the weekend. Thank you so much to Sean McKillop, who invited me to do that. It's very inspiring and eye-opening. I talked to a whole bunch of them, and I'll try to get that up later on this week. I learned a lot from them. So thanks to all of those amazing heroes who inspired me this weekend. It was a great and productive meeting, and I look forward to seeing what they do next, advocating for themselves and their work. And we should all be advocating for every adult, every educator in all of our kids' schools and communities, buildings, buses, and everywhere else. So thanks again to them. It was an awesome weekend. I hope that you had a good weekend. I'm very happy to have you here. And we're just about 5 weeks away from PODJAM 2 in Las Vegas. So we would love to see you there. Get your tickets. There's a link in the show notes. It's going to be an amazing time. We've got great guests, some of our favorite guests joining us. So get your tickets to PODJAM. I've got your headlines. I've got your clips and conversation with David Rothkopf coming up. So let's do it. All right, let's get to the headlines that I've got for you. First, the Pope remains in critical condition, according to the Vatican. Blood tests showing mild signs of kidney failure, which is currently under control, apparently. The Vatican said late yesterday the 88-year-old pontiff is battling pneumonia in both lungs. So we could lose the Pope. He's in critical condition, and we could see the whole ceremony and pomp of picking a new Pope, or he could be okay and live for another 20 years. What do I know? But keep that in your mind and him in your prayers if that's the kind of thing that you do. And now let's move to the Trump administration, because there's so much to say. Let's see. Sunday, we learned that they're placing all but a fraction of the staffers at the USAID International Development on leave. All but just a fraction on leave, and eliminating at least 1,600 U.S.-based jobs. The move comes after a federal judge on Friday allowed the administration to move forward with its plan to pull thousands of USAID staffers off the job in the United States and around the world. That is going to be a staggering impact for people who need our help all over the world, and for America's reputation. And the rest of the world is going to have to try to pick up the slack and fill the gap. They won't be able to, make no mistake, because of how much work the U.S. did. And maybe there's some way to repair that or claw back what we've lost at some point. But that is a devastating blow. In Germany, speaking of devastating blows, their conservative opposition won a victory in national election yesterday, while Alternative for Germany doubled its support, and the strongest showing for a far-right party since World War II. So that is also a major story. Trump was very happy about that. Now let's come home. The first nationwide database tracking misconduct by federal police officers. There's a whole database tracking the misconduct by police officers who work for the federal government, law enforcement agents who work for the federal government. Well, guess what? It's been shut down. Because why track the misconduct of federal police officers? The Justice Department confirmed this. They deleted this resource that experts said improved public safety by helping prevent bad officers from jumping to new agencies and starting over with clean records. How about that? That's pretty terrible. Oh, but don't worry. The FBI now has a new deputy in charge. It's Don Bongiorno. Remember this guy? You know this guy, Don Bongiorno, the Fox News superstar? An ultra asshole. I mean, this guy has attacked everybody, including me, over the past. Everybody gets attacked by this right-wing conspiracy theorist who is now a deputy FBI director. It's terrible news, and I'm not going to say shocking, but it's kind of shocking. It's a radical departure from the FBI's history to have this right-wing pundit and podcaster who was a former Secret Service agent to the number 2 post at the country's most powerful law enforcement agency. So who's going to be number 3? The ghost of J. Edgar Hoover? I mean, who could they surprise us with next? Thought this was an interesting story. An entire Alabama police department has been put on leave after a grand jury recommended its abolition. The mayor of a city in Alabama placed its entire police department on administration leave a day after officials announced that the grand jury had recommended the small department be abolished, saying it had operated as more of a criminal enterprise than a law enforcement agency. It's an ongoing threat to public safety. The cops. Yeah, in Alabama. What a shock. Sounds like the Dukes of Hazzard, because it was. Also, shocking news, yesterday morning we learned that MSNBC has canceled Joy Reid's evening show as part of a major programming shakeup, and that's getting a lot of attention, and you're seeing the tributes to Joy being poured out by everybody from Ellie Mistal, well, to me. I love Joy. She's a really good friend of mine and a huge advocate for people of color in media, and really a kind of a gatekeeper or the opener of many doors, creator of many opportunities over there. And I have no doubt that whatever she does next is going to be even better than what she was doing there. But that is really sad and shocking news to learn over the weekend. Also found out that the Philadelphia Eagles are not going to the White House. That's right. The Super Bowl champions have snubbed an invitation from Donald Trump, and apparently, recent discussions between players and the front office resulted in a massive no when asked if they would accept the invitation to the nation's capital. Quote, "We represent a city and a state that is pushing for equal rights, respect, and values that respect every human being," said one player who spoke anonymously. "We won't forget what happened and the criticism we received for taking a stand against racism, and we won't back down from our values of respect, integrity, and equality." He's talking about back in 2017 when Trump was president the first time and said, anybody who takes a knee, the national anthem, should be fired. Yeah, that's what he said. Also, Trump spoke at CPAC over the weekend, and here, I won't play anything, but here's a list of what he said, things he said. Said he was angry repeatedly and made odd noises while saying angry. Said he and Elon Musk were searching Fort Knox for gold, and they hope it's not missing. He started cursing at Joe Biden and blamed the crashing markets on Biden. He said MSNBC was a threat to democracy. He attacked CNN and said he doesn't talk about CNN. Then he talked about CNN. He said he should go up against Rachel Maddow in the ratings. He said his first 4 years in office are like the first 4 holes of golf for some reason. He said he's demanding Ukraine give us rare earth and oil and anything else. He said thousands of government workers are fired are actually just radical left liberals. He said that Elon Musk's position is not the head of Doge, but that he's a patriot. He said the 2024 election was rigged and he got more votes. He said his approval rating is the highest ever, when in fact it's the lowest ever by this time since 1953. And he said America was the wealthiest in the late 19th century, so that's the 1870s. So we need to go back to that. Those are just some of the things aggregated by somebody. I forget who listed that, but it's funny. Maybe the Midas Touch guys, I forget. And also I saw this and thought it was funny. Rudy Giuliani was caught at a Walmart in New Jersey looking for hair coloring. Isn't that funny? He's taking his time buying some new hair dye while he's rolling around in a scooter at Walmart. All right. Well, those are the headlines that I've gathered for you here on a Monday in late February. Let's get to the audio that I've got for you. And several of you stepped up and sent me great ideas over the weekend, including our friend Kim Nyborg in Iowa, who I would not have seen this J.B. Pritzker State of the State address, which was very moving. And I'm going to play a whole bunch of it for you right now. He is the governor of Illinois. He is Jewish himself, and I thought this was powerful, important, and I want to share it with you right now. Here he is over the weekend.
The new administration and the Republican Congress and Elon Musk intend to take these programs away. For all the Illinoisans watching at home, let me be clear. This is going to affect your daily lives. Our state budget can't make up for the damage that is done to people across our state if they succeed. There are people, some in my own party, who think that if you just give Donald Trump everything that he wants, he'll make an exception and he'll spare you some of the harm. I'll ignore the moral abdication of that position for just a second to say almost none of these people have had the experience with the president that I do. I once swallowed my pride to offer him what he values most, public praise on the Sunday news shows, in return for ventilators and N95 masks during the worst of the pandemic. We made a deal. And it turns out his promises were as broken as the BiPAP machines he sent us instead of ventilators. Going along to get along does not work. Just ask the Trump-fearing red state governors.
J.B. Pritzker, and I've got more for you. This is the good part. I mean, if you thought that was interesting, that was just him pointing out a different strategy, and that don't kiss Trump's ass because nothing good comes of it, which is something that we've debated in the past. J.B. Pritzker has made his choice, but this is where it gets very powerful. 5 minutes or so, and is it too long? I don't think so. You're not going to want to miss any of this final part of his State of the State address.
I've been reflecting these last 4 weeks on two important parts of my life. My work helping to build the Illinois Holocaust Museum and the 2 times that I've had the privilege of reciting the oath of office for Illinois governor. As some of you know, Skokie, Illinois once had one of the largest populations of Holocaust survivors anywhere in the world. In 1978, Nazis decided that they wanted to march there. The leaders of that march knew that the images of swastika-clad young men goose-stepping down a peaceful suburban street would terrorize the local Jewish population, so many of whom had never recovered from their time in German concentration camps. The prospect of that march sparked a legal fight that went all the way to the Supreme Court. It was a Jewish lawyer from the ACLU who argued the case for the Nazis, contending that even the most hateful of speech was protected under the First Amendment. As an American and as a Jew, I find it difficult to resolve my feelings around that Supreme Court case. But I am grateful that the prospect of Nazis marching in their streets spurred the survivors and other Skokie residents to act. They joined together to form the Holocaust Memorial Foundation and build the first Illinois Holocaust Museum in a storefront in 1981, a small but important forerunner to the one I helped to build 30 years later here. I do not invoke the specter of Nazis lightly, but I know the history intimately and have spent more time than probably anyone in this room with people who survived the Holocaust. Here's what I've learned. The root that tears apart your house's foundation begins as a seed of distrust and hate and blame. The seed that grew into a dictatorship in Europe a lifetime ago didn't arrive overnight. It started with everyday Germans mad about inflation and looking for someone to blame. I'm watching with a foreboding dread what is happening in our country right now. A president who watches a plane go down in the Potomac and suggests without facts or findings that a diversity hire is responsible for the crash. Or the Missouri Attorney General who just sued Starbucks, arguing that consumers pay higher prices for their coffee because the baristas are too female and non-white. The authoritarian playbook is laid bare here. They point to a group of people who don't look like you and tell you to blame them for your problems. I just have one question. What comes next? After we've discriminated against, deported, or disparaged all the immigrants and the gay and lesbian and transgender people, the developmentally disabled, the women, and the minorities, once we've ostracized our neighbors and betrayed our friends, after that, when the problems we started with are still there staring us in the face, what comes next? All the atrocities of human history lurk in the answer to that question. And if we don't want to repeat history, then for God's sake, in this moment, we better be strong enough to learn from it. I swore the following oath on Abraham Lincoln's Bible. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of governor according to the best of my ability. My oath is to the Constitution of our state and of our country. We don't have kings in America, and I don't intend to bend the knee to one. I'm not speaking up in service to my ambitions, but in deference to my obligations. If you think I'm overreacting and sounding the alarm too soon, consider this. It took the Nazis 1 month, 3 weeks, 2 days, 8 hours, and 40 minutes to dismantle a constitutional republic. And all I'm saying is that when the 5-alarm fire starts to burn, every good person better be ready to man a post with a bucket of water if you want to stop it from raging out of control. Those Illinois Nazis did end up holding their march in 1978, just not in Skokie. After all the blowback from the case, they decided to march in Chicago instead. Only 20 of them showed up. But 2,000 people came to counter-protest. The Chicago Tribune reported that day that the rally sputtered to an unspectacular end after 10 minutes. It was Illinoisans who smothered those embers before they could burn into a flame. Tyranny requires your fear and your silence and your compliance. Democracy requires your courage. So gather your justice and humanity, Illinois, and do not let the tragic spirit of despair overcome us when our country needs us the most. Thank you.
J.B. Pritzker, what a speech. Man, very powerful. And I'm very happy to have heard that. Thanks, Kim, for sending that to me. And hopefully you appreciate it as much as I did. All right, now here's another clip sent to me by a few different listeners that, have you seen this? This is Jonathan Pye. He's like a comedian and commentator playing this character, Jonathan Pye, in the UK. He's very well known over there. And this is very, very vulgar language. He calls the right-wingers over there cocksuckers many times, a phrase I don't use, but somehow funnier when he does. This is Jonathan Pye.
The tech billionaire reiterated calls by the US president and Russia for Ukraine to hold new elections, saying President Zelensky is despised by his people and reiterating President Trump's assertion that he is a dictator. Neville Chamberlain must be down there now, thinking at last a bigger fucking pussy than I was, because at least Neville Chamberlain didn't come back reading from a bit of anti-Czech propaganda that Hitler had written for him. Are we still America's allies now that America is openly using Kremlin propaganda? Trump is clearly one of the worst negotiators in geopolitical history. The first time ever an American president has criticised an ally for not surrendering to an invading army, you fucking pussyhole. Trump claiming that Ukraine started the war is like Roosevelt saying, well, what the fuck were those ships doing in Pearl Harbor in the first place? The art of the deal, eh? the great negotiator, showed his hand after 2 seconds, showed the world that he'd been entirely captured by Kremlin talking points. Instead of at least pretending to be neutral so that he could get his Nobel Peace Prize, he immediately showed that he was openly hostile to one of the parties, and not the invader, the invaded. The art of the deal. The guy negotiating with Russia is a Fox News host. Although, what's the point of a functioning Defence Department if you're going to surrender to your enemy after just 1 month in office? Imagine being the President of the United States with the richest man in the world as your pet and still shitting the bed every time someone points out that you're being a wanker. And you can tell that Trump doesn't actually think Zelensky is a dictator because his nose isn't nestled up Zelensky's anus whilst giving him a reach around like he does with real, actual dictators. The UK didn't have a general election for 10 years because of World War II. That doesn't make Winston Churchill a dictator. Zelensky has not banned opposition parties, just the ones openly pro-Russian. Just like we banned the fascist party when Hitler was bombing the shit out of us on a nightly basis. Zelensky has not banned independent media, just pro-Russian propaganda. And NATO expansionism is not the reason we have this war. NATO expansion on Russia's borders stopped in 2004. So what? Russia was so annoyed that they waited 10 years to invade Crimea and then a quick 8-year breather and then on to Ukraine. Utter bollocks. And now let's see what the UK's favourite fag-smoking everyman MAGA flag shagger Nigel Farage has to say on the matter. Oh, no, he's not available for comment because he's on a plane flying off to a Trump cheerleading conference in Washington to share the stage with Liz Truss, Steve Bannon and Elon Musk, who's holding a chainsaw. Oh, no, we've got him on the line. Over to you, Nigel. Well, I think you find, if you know your history, we did have elections during the Second World War. So, yes, Nigel, you're quite right. But we waited until Hitler had blown his fucking brains out, you disingenuous, cowardly, boot-licking, Trump line-towing, cock-sucking coward.
Wow. How about it? Amazing. Absolutely love that dude. Very, very funny. And check out the whole thing. There's more than just that. All right. Now let's get to Christian nationalist and white supremacist Pete Hegseth, who was on Fox News over the weekend trying to defend the firing of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who is a very celebrated military man, as well as the head of the Navy, who is a woman, because he fired both of them. There's a whole bunch of leaders of the military and the different branches. They're all white men except for these two. He fired the black guy, who was the head of it, and the woman, who was the head of the Navy, who were very accomplished. He thought they were, he said in the past, DEI hires, because he is a real POS. Here's Pete Hegseth on Fox News, which is where he worked last before he became the Secretary of Defense.
Branches. For people who may not know, I mean, they give advice to the military about what is lawful and what isn't. Not surprisingly, there's been some backlash to those who are worried about their removal. One Georgetown law professor says this: Trump also firing the Army, Navy, and Air Force JAGs. In some ways, that's even more chilling than firing the 4 stars. It's what you do when you're planning to break the law. You get rid of any lawyers who might try to slow you down. Your response to her?
Yeah, I don't know who Rosa is and what her hyperbole is all about. Ultimately, we want lawyers who give sound constitutional advice and don't exist to attempt to be roadblocks to anything that happens in their spots. What we know about these TJAGs, they're called TJAGs inside the military. Traditionally, they've been elected by each other or chosen by each other, which is exactly how it works often with the chairman as well. Small group of insulated officers who perpetuate the status quo. Well, guess what? Status quo hasn't worked very well at the Pentagon. It's time for fresh blood. So we're going to open
branches.
All right, there you go. Pete Hegseth. Such an unbelievable flaming asshole. There you go. Let's get to, speaking of which, here's another one. Mark Wayne Mullen. He's a senator from Oklahoma. He was on Meet the Press trying to defend cuts to people in his own state.
To the people in Oklahoma who've lost their jobs, who say they are hurting. They don't know how they're going to pay their mortgage. They don't know how they're going to make ends meet. Talk to those people. What's your message to them? They say enough of these cuts.
Well, I would tell you that the majority of the American people want to make sure that their taxpayers are being used correctly. I don't want anybody to lose their job. That's the last thing we want. But at the same time, anytime you're trying to secure this country, which a national security risk we have right now is our national debt, we have to make changes, and we have to make it quickly. Unfortunately, when we have bureaucrats and politicians that have wastefully spent the American taxpayer dollars, and we don't have to look any further than USAID to see the wasteful billions of dollars that were spent, cuts had to take place. And every business owner understands this. Every business owner understands that you have to get your house in order before you can advance. That's exactly what Doge is doing. Think about this. Every successful business owner.
All right, there you go. That's all we've got for you from that idiot. And now let's go to Jim Acosta, former CNN anchor and reporter who served a long time in the White House press corps and interviewed and asked questions to a whole bunch of different powerful people, including Trump. And he is no longer at CNN, but he is doing his own thing. And this is what he had to say about the controversy surrounding the banning of the Associated Press. Associated Press has filed a lawsuit, and Jim Acosta was going through it and had this reaction.
Keep in mind, I'm going through this right now, and I mean, the way they lay this out so methodically is so important here. It lays out some of the facts of the case. It says here, on the morning of February 11th, 2025, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt summoned the AP chief White House correspondent, Zeke Miller, to her office. She told him that at President Trump's direction, this is according to the lawsuit, the AP would no longer be permitted in the Oval Office as part of the press pool until and unless AP revised its style book to refer to the body of water known for hundreds of years as the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. Leavitt provided no other reason for the decision other to compel the AP to change the language of the reporting, nor did she object to any particular conduct by Miller or any other journalist. And that's such an important point right there. So they bring in Zeke Miller. I've known Zeke for a long time, really good reporter with the AP. They bring him into the White House press secretary's office. And the White House press secretary says to Zeke, right on the spot, it's because of the way you refer to the Gulf of America, or you refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of Mexico and not the Gulf of America as the rationale for doing this. You're caught red-handed. Donald Trump, you've been caught red-handed trying to violate the free speech rights of the Associated Press. And it's just not going to happen. I had a Trump-appointed judge in my case. Trump-appointed judge came down very hard on the Trump White House during that first term. And so it's no surprise that that's happening here.
All right, Jim Acosta reviewing the AP's lawsuit, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens there. And now let's go to ABC's This Week, where Martha Raddatz had Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, on and asked him point blank, who's the aggressor, Russia or Ukraine? You'll be shocked to learn that he did not answer the question, but here it is.
In more territory, can you acknowledge that Russia is the aggressor here?
Well, you know what? Who would you rather having go toe-to-toe with the likes of Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Xi, or anyone else? Joe Biden or Donald Trump? He's the deal-maker-in-chief. He's the commander-in-chief, and it's only because of his strength that we're even in this position. And President Trump's own words have been that Russia invaded a neighbor under Bush, under Obama, and under Biden, but not him. It didn't happen his first term, and he's going to bring it to an end his second term. And I just laid out the framework to do that we are all. He has a great team around him that everybody is moving out on simultaneously, from our Secretary of Treasury to our Secretary of State to our Secretary of Defense and, of course, our special envoy. And that's what's going on. And, you know, people are welcome to bring better ideas, but all I've heard is perpetuate more war. And that is, no one should be surprised that that's not what President Trump campaigned on or intends to do.
All right, here's Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, I think, on Face the Nation, one of the Sunday shows.
What we are witnessing are illegal actions by Elon Musk. And a number of courts, as you know, have issued temporary restraining orders on their efforts to seize important private information but also on their overall conduct. So what the head of management, the State Department, said is Elon Musk doesn't have the authority to require State Department employees to answer these questions. That has to happen in the chain of command.
Even though the president says he wants him to be more aggressive.
So the reality is we don't know what the president meant, but as you pointed out, you've got Elon Musk taking a chainsaw to the federal government and important services. And there's no Article 4 in the Constitution that gives Elon Musk that authority. And the way that he's been sort of, quote, delegated this authority is illegal. And the actions he's taking are illegal, and we need to shut down this illegal operation.
Okay. All right. Well, I also thought this was a really interesting clip I found from a guy named Sir Alex Young. He was the head of the UK's secret or the intelligence apparatus MI6. And he was there for like 10 years. He was on a talk show laying out the situation that the planet, that the world finds itself in, the geopolitical situation as we see it and as it looks going forward. This is pretty somber and ominous sounding, but I wanted to share it with you because it sounds like a pretty smart analysis from a guy who would know.
I think we are in a new era where, by and large, international relations aren't going to be determined by rules and multilateral institutions. They're going to be determined by strong men and deals. I think of the Yalta Treaty at the end of 1945, where three strong men, as they were then, on behalf of the big countries, the strong countries, decided the fate of small countries. I think that's Donald Trump's mindset. It's certainly Putin's mindset. It's Xi Jinping's mindset. It's not Europe's mindset. That's the world we're going into for a whole set of reasons, and I don't think we're going back to the one we had before.
Why do you say that?
Because the one we had before was based on the unipolar moment where America had both the means and the will to assert itself across the world. It created what we call globalization, the international security structure. It's now a significantly smaller player relative to others than it was. And of course, its will to be that person has diminished. So it still remains a prodigious country. You underestimate America at your peril. But its ability to make rules across the world, that's not there now. Okay. We are seeing deals. We're seeing a conversation about spheres of influence. And I think the only people who haven't woken up to this reality is us.
Europe.
Yeah, and there's an entry ticket to this conversation, it appears, and sadly it's not our soft power or our values, it's hard power. And it leaves the category challenge for us in Europe. How do we develop that to get ourselves a seat in this conversation? No, I think it's unfortunate, and I agree with Catherine, this will be emboldening to Putin. I don't know whether Donald Trump actually buys the Russian line, but I think the Russians probably think he does, and I think that significantly diminishes his leverage. And I saw this happen in Afghanistan, where he gave away the biggest concession before we even started. It's a strange art of the deal, honestly. Zelensky and Trump, they're in their way different politicians. Zelensky had no choice, I think, but to respond when he was accused of lacking democratic legitimacy. And Donald Trump is notoriously thin-skinned, and we've got into this spat. I do not think we should read too much into it. These negotiations are at a very early stage. They're going to be highly complicated. Exactly as I expected, Russia has gone maximal to the point that they may even have overreached. It's going to be very, very hard for Trump to cut through this in a way that produces anything that isn't an abject humiliation.
All right. There you go. Those are the clips, the headlines. That's what I've got for you today. And now it's time to get to my conversation with David Rothkopf. You can listen to him on his podcast, Deep State Radio Network. There's a whole bunch of shows that they've got on the network. You can read him on Substack. You can subscribe there. You should get a paid subscription if you can, because it's great, and it's great to support David and others. It's Need to Know, davidrothkopf.substack.com, as well as read him at the Daily Beast. Follow him on Blue Sky and other social media. All the links to learn more about David, who's an author who's written 10 books, I believe, and a very smart, well-connected guy. Always happy when he joins me in one of your favorites. Let's do it right now with Rothkopf. Yay! David Rothkopf is here. I don't know what to talk about with you. There's not a lot going on, but I figure we could start with freedom of speech. Where are you on speech generally? You've practiced it your whole life professionally. You've seen how it's practiced in other countries and at other times. What do you think about the whole First Amendment thing? Is it overrated?
I love the First Amendment. I think that sometime soon we are going to look back on it and say, you remember that First Amendment? That was a good one. That was one we really enjoyed while it lasted. But in the past week, we've had the U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. say that he is going to start prosecuting people who criticize or oppose the president, which is anti-First Amendment. And we've also had him send a letter to a congressman who had taken a shot at Elon Musk, a verbal shot, saying, was this a threat? And we take this seriously and we can prosecute you. And we've had Tom Homan, the thug who heads the immigration side for these guys, say that he thinks and has submitted to DOJ for consideration that AOC should be prosecuted for giving information to immigrants about what their rights are. All of these are blatant violations of the First Amendment coming from the anti-censorship administration, and remind us that whatever it is these guys say they care about and whatever it is they say they're doing, they're actually doing the opposite.
Tom Homan seems nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he seems like his favorite thing is bashing through doors and taking brown people and sending them off into the jungle.
Yeah.
And which we're doing. Did you read the New York Times story yesterday? We're like taking people who came here from Afghanistan because they'd be killed at home, and we're sending them to Panama illegally, locking them in hotels, and then sending them to the edge of the jungle, the Darien Gap, a part of the jungle that's so awful that people who are trying to emigrate north can't get through it because they're so likely to get killed. And we're sending them there, and then we're going to send them home where they'll be killed because this is a great country, America.
Do you think that that Nazi salutes should be covered by the First Amendment?
Yeah, they are covered by the First Amendment. You can Nazi salute. You can Nazi salute all you want. And Elon did it. And now Steve Bannon, who hates Elon, which I like about Steve Bannon, it's the only thing, except all those shirts. I love the fact that he's always wearing like 4 shirts, that's a real throwback look. Yeah, but although typically that is in the 80s in movies, they'd wear like multiple shirts because all the actors were skinny. Steve Bannon's a big fat slob, so what he's doing is trying to hide his man boobs. That's right. It's not working, Steve. But anyway, so he yesterday at CPAC, he threw out one of these Sig Heil salutes. Mm-hmm. He should be free to do that. But we should all be free to go, gee, these guys are fucking Nazis. Like they're doing Nazi salutes. Their president had a book of Hitler speeches by his bed. He defended neo-Nazis. The vice president went off to Germany and he met with the neo-Nazis and he said there should be more of a place for neo-Nazis in European politics. How many times and in how many ways do these people have to say they love Nazis before you start thinking maybe they're Nazis?
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like you don't need to question it. You just need to talk to some people who say, I'm a Nazi. And then you ask them, what do you think of Donald Trump or J.D. Vance or Elon Musk? And they're like, oh, I love them. So if Nazis who say I'm a Nazi and they're actual neo-Nazis in America or elsewhere say I like them, then it doesn't really matter what they're doing or even saying because that's the...
Yeah, it's true. If they're doing a Hitler salute or if they're saying we support the Alternative for Germany neo-Nazi party or we support neo-Nazi leaders, whether it's Viktor Orban or Vladimir Putin or some Nazi skinhead group that's marching in Charlottesville, Virginia, then it's easier to make these. And I don't understand. There's all the medias. Elon Musk made an arm gesture, which was offensive to some people who thought it might be. And it's, what the fuck are you talking? One of the advantages of the First Amendment is that it allows people to say things so that you can actually understand what they believe. And these people have told us loud and clear, they don't like brown people, they don't like women, they don't like gay people, they don't like trans, but they really hate trans people. There's something going on under that. That really frightens them in some way. And they like white men, particularly white Christian men. I don't think they're very big on us white Jewish men. And by us, I mean me, not you.
Oh, yeah. I think clearly anybody listening knew you weren't talking about me because I am nothing.
No, totally not true. And you're 25% Lebanese, which makes you brownish.
People don't know that. I'm going to edit it out.
Okay, let's be proud of who you are, Pete. Own who you are.
I want to talk with you a little bit about our efforts abroad, or foreign policy, if you will, specifically Ukraine and Canada. So if you want to time together, fine. But let's start with Ukraine and J.D. Vance going over to Germany, the Munich Security Conference. Knowing the likes of you, you probably attended in the past, and you've been covering these issues, writing about these issues, specifically Ukraine, since the invasion started and before. And talk to me about what we've seen in the past few days, especially with Trump overwhelmingly coming out in support of Putin and against Zelensky, calling Zelensky a dictator. And we've heard him say many times before that it was Ukraine's fault and so on. But we all have eyes. We know that Russia invaded, and there seems to be a split, by the way, David, with some Republican senators and some right-wing talkers like Mark Levin on this issue, which I think does matter a little bit. But what do you think about the last few days? You could start in Munich and take me up to today, and any observations.
Look, let me try and say it slowly and in short declarative sentences, okay, because it's really important.
Thank you for that.
What we have seen in the past week is the biggest reversal in U.S. foreign policy history, the biggest betrayal of American national interests in U.S. foreign policy history, a moment where we have switched sides in Ukraine from supporting the country that was invaded, that is trying to defend democracy, that is trying to defend Western values, that is trying to hold off a war crime committing an aggressor, and we've switched sides to supporting the war crime committing aggressor. It's if Nazi Germany had invaded the Sudetenland and Poland, and they were now moving into the Netherlands and France, and we had been supporting Western allies, and halfway through we said, you know something? We're now with Hitler. We're now with the aggressor who's violating international
Except that halfway through point would be the election.
Well, perhaps. But the point is this. We switched, and there's no nuance about it. You had J.D. Vance. First of all, you had Pete Hegseth, who got there first, saying we were not going to defend our European allies. They could no longer count on us for defense. And that he enumerated a number of positions with regard to Ukraine. There were major switches in U.S. positions, like Ukraine can never be part of NATO, and they have to negotiate with the Russians now, and so on and so forth. Having said that, you then had J.D. Vance go to Munich, not only embrace the neo-Nazi party, but reiterate this shift in position. You then had Marco Rubio going to Saudi and entering into a discussion with the Russians, which was about Ukraine to some extent, although Ukraine was not present, which is absolutely non-starter in terms of peace talks. But we're also about normalizing relations with the Russians, who we haven't sat down with in that way since they had their 2022 escalation of their invasion of Ukraine. We, at that moment, started giving Putin what he wanted. This was compounded then by the president of the United States, who said he spoke to Putin. He wants Russia to be back in the G8, that we expelled them for doing what they did. We stopped meeting with them. And that we should look, as Rubio said, to all the deals and things that we could strike with the Russians. He then later said that Zelensky was a dictator, that Zelensky was responsible for this war. and that only Trump could solve it. There's one thing here, which just a bugaboo of mine, and I'm just going to lay it out there for your folks. Trump always says this wouldn't have happened if I were president. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014. They were fighting in Ukraine, taking over Ukrainian land for every single minute that Trump was president the last time around. And Trump didn't stop it. Trump embraced Putin back then. And his whole line that he is the only one who can stop this is complete bullshit. What he wants to do is give his pal Vlad a big win. And somebody this week wrote me an email and said, what do you think accounts for Trump's switch over to Russia? And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I didn't put it that way. Trump has been pro-Russia since he went to Moscow with his wife, Ivana, whose father was in the Czech Communist Party in 1980, and has been trying to kiss the ass of the Russians ever since, invited the Russians to help him win the election in 2016, which they tried to do, met with Putin, threw out all the anti-Russia talking points that Rex Tillerson and all the people around him had given him, kissed Putin's ass. Then in Helsinki in 2018, kissed Putin's ass in public and said, I trust Putin more than I trust the intelligence community. This has always been where Trump is. And during the election, you and I talked about what was going on in the election. We said Trump is going to switch sides. Yeah. He doesn't like the Ukrainians. He likes the Russians. And this is exactly where we are. Problem is, it's not about Ukraine. What it does is it empowers an aggressor who seeks to expand into Europe, into Moldova, into Georgia, into the Baltics. This will trigger further conflicts, put Europe at further risk, put the United States at further risk. And even if we weaken or pull out of NATO, ultimately this kind of conflict will end up with Americans at risk, directly and indirectly. And this is why the Europeans are like, okay, we can't count on the United States anymore. We've got to defend ourselves. And they should. Frankly, they should do it. They should stop buying U.S. weapons. They should just get out of the business of helping the United States, because the United States is throwing them under the bus.
One thing you didn't mention, I think it's a big deal, is here's a headline at Bloomberg: when the U.S. stops fighting corruption, Russia wins. And a lot of people talking about how the Department of Justice announced that they were throwing out the foreign corruption, whatever this.
Well, no, there's several things that happened. They said they would not enforce the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Okay, which, by the way, they're supposed to enforce the laws. That's one of the things they're sworn to do. There was a division in the Department of Justice that targeted foreign criminal organizations, particularly corrupt Russian oligarchs, was the one that had identified Russian oligarchs that had violated our laws and had been prosecuting them. They shut that down. There was also a division within the Department of Homeland Security, which was created to protect us from foreign interference in our elections, which was primarily Russian interference in our elections. They shut that down. They have put a person who is pro-Russia, pro-Russian propagandist in as the head of the Director of National Intelligence. They are eliminating people at the CIA and will soon start to eliminate people in the FBI who've been involved in counterterrorism, involved in counterintelligence and protecting us from the Russians. They are getting us out of NATO, which has been our primary alliance to contain the Russians and to protect us from them. They've stood down. The United States viewed Russia as an enemy and had a variety of systems in place to protect us from Russia. Those are gone. It's off. Russia's our friend. Russia can do whatever the hell it wants. They will do whatever the hell they want because they don't love Trump like Trump loves them, right? Trump, the goal of Russia from the beginning, weaken the U.S.'s alliances, bring down their principal opponent in the world, both parties, every American. Trump doesn't get it because he's a boob.
Lots more that I want to discuss with you, but I feel like the clock is ticking second by second, minute by minute, day by day here as things are continuing to unfold. It's hard to look away from it, and it's all you want to do is look away from it. And you should, to take some time for yourself and find joy and relax and come back to the fight, if you will. But I just heard from, I knew these kind of things were happening, but I just heard from a businessman friend of mine who was saying that, you know, commercial real estate developers now, for example, getting really worried about banks are starting to question doing commercial loans for projects because they don't know how to arbitrage what Trump is doing to the country and economy. Some really tectonic stuff starting to move, and big business is aghast. At some point, it would seem that the captains of industry, lobbyists, and others are going to come in and stop this techno-fascism, because it really does seem, and I'd love to get your take on it, but I've been talking to a lot of people who are experts on the Elon Musk, Mark Andreessen, Peter Thiel, techno-fascist network state folks. It's a small group of people who want to do that. I think big banks and other big industries have gone along with it to survive and so on, like auto industry, fossil fuels, and so on. What do you think could change in terms of the most influential, powerful, wealthiest individuals, organizations, and industries saying, oh, no, enough is enough. You got to stop doing this nonsense, cutting government, et cetera?
Oh, first, I don't know. I do think that Trump is responsive to markets. We've seen it, because when Trump announced that we were going to launch tariffs against the Canadians and the Mexicans, the stock market went down, and he immediately took several steps back. He put a kind of mainstream Wall Street type, mainstream as Trump's going to get, as the Treasury Secretary, and he is clearly going to represent some of those mainstream views. But having said that, almost all these big companies view Trump as, and by the way, every country in the world views Trump as a sucker. They think, because he thinks he's a brilliant deal maker, that they're going to go in and get what they want. And many of them are, right? The oil industry said, well, yeah, sure, we'll go donate some money. And Trump's drill, baby, drill. And he's going to get rid of regulations. And he's getting rid of all this environmental push. And he is helping them to make more. So they're happy. That group is happy. And the tech brothers are like, we'll get rid of the regulations. We'll be able to do the AI that we want. We'll be able to target the competitors that we want. And that is happening. And of course, Elon and the other insiders are getting what Elon and the other insiders want. Elon today, the day that we're recording this, which is Friday, we learned that a case against SpaceX was dropped for discrimination. It was just dropped. His company benefited from that. Elon and Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen and a bunch of these other guys, they're really heavy into crypto. The SEC, the Trump SEC, dropped a case against a big crypto company today, and they're going to move us heavily into crypto. Now, that may be one of the fault lines in all of this, because Musk has already made some noises like the U.S. has a bunch of debt that they shouldn't honor. Of course, this would be catastrophic in terms of the global system if the United States were not to honor its debt, and it could cause a collapse of the dollar, collapse of markets, and so forth. But what I think their goal is to cause enough ruction and turbulence to get more people to embrace crypto, not because they think crypto is good, but because they will make money if the demand for crypto goes up. And then they will do what they do in these circumstances, because these are not long-term investors. These are people who play the market. They'll get out.
Yeah.
And what you need to do is you need to look at Trump and Musk and all these people, not as former government officials who would say, we are interested in the long-term United States, a kind of Warren Buffett view of investing, long-term interest. They're traders who they are corporate raiders who are going to go in, take over a company via hostile takeover, take over a country via hostile takeover, and then sell off the parts for as much as they can make of it, and then get out before the whole thing collapses and let somebody else own the pain. And whether this is Trump, who'll be 82 at the end of his term and will be ready to move on to just living, the last years of his life in extreme luxury, or it's Musk, who's just trying to up his take because $400 billion doesn't seem to be enough for him. These people are breaking up the U.S. and selling it off for parts. And the people who are going to be left holding the bag are all of us who have a long-term interest in the U.S. because we live here, because our kids grow up here, because our grandkids grow up here, because these are our homes. And we're going to have to deal with the fact that the United States is going to be gutted, raped by corporate raiders.
What do you make of what is going on right now with Elon Musk inside the government and all these cuts? Earlier, you said, I like Bannon because he hates Musk.
No, I said there's one thing about Bannon.
Earlier, you said, I love Steve Bannon. I'd like to spend some time with him just walking our dogs, which I was shocked by.
But the reason I spend time with you is that you remind me so much of Steve Bannon.
Oh, wow. We do have similar hair. So here's what Bannon said. What he likes about Musk is that he's destroying the administrative state. What is all these stories, David, that are coming out about what he's doing, that firing veterans who've done several tours like a dog, like cutting them off, getting rid of people in the Park Service. You're seeing all these stories, these anecdotes come out from the individuals. They're talking to everybody from the New York Times to your Substack. How is this affecting the game, the paradigm, the conversation when you see that? Because a lot of people say government's huge, it's bloated, we can afford some cuts, and they're okay with it. They're okay even with the guy doing it who's a horrible, criminal, terrible human being, conspiracy theorist, white supremacist. They don't care who's doing it. But doesn't it matter? Doesn't it change opinion? The more and more people pay attention, as your friend Greg Sargent, who hosts a podcast on your network, said today, looking at the polling, like Elon Musk's approval ratings are plummeting, and it's almost as if people are learning who he is. Doesn't it matter?
Of course it matters, because first of all, he has a job that doesn't really exist. He has an entity that doesn't really exist. That is being empowered to do things that it doesn't have the right to do. And he's going into it with this kind of false confidence that rich people have that they're actually geniuses. And in fact, he doesn't understand the government at all. He doesn't understand what people do.
Clearly.
The notion that somehow it is promoting efficiency to fire people wholesale without asking what the fuck they do for a living is ridiculous. And we've seen what happened, right? He fired a bunch of people who, oh, by the way, were responsible for keeping nuclear weapons safe. He's fired a bunch of people who, oh, by the way, were responsible for helping us fight avian flu, which is already a big outbreak. In the past 24 hours, they've started to fire 7,000 people at the IRS. And you have to ask yourself, wait, weren't we supposed to be trying to reduce the deficit here? Because these people actually produce revenue. And you know how you know? Because it's called the Internal Revenue Service, okay? It's the sales department of the United States government. It's where we generate revenue. But he is doing all of this in a way that has big drama, makes big headlines, and makes Trump happy because it looks like he's fucking doing something. And most Americans don't care because the conversations they're hearing in the media are Republicans saying, we have to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. And a Democrat then saying, yeah, we really should get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. And here are 100 reasons why this isn't the way to do it. But the people don't listen to the 100 reasons.
Right.
We never get that far in the conversation, and nobody really gives a shit. Now, what we're seeing is that average Americans are getting screwed. The veterans you talked about, the people who had kids with disabilities who had to rely on the Department of Education to send a bus to get their kid to school or to pay for the bus that gets their kid to school. And they're not going to be able to do that. Or people soon who will discover that there aren't food stamps or there isn't Medicaid and so forth. And I think more so than the corporates who can be bought out, what's really going to be the problem for Trump and Musk and everybody else is that they're screwing the American people. That government actually helps people, that the myth that government is the problem is easily demonstrated. And the way to demonstrate it is to do what they're doing, which is take away services upon which people depend. And at the end of the day, at the school board meeting, at the town council meeting, at the state legislature meeting, and in the United States Congress, there are going to be people who are having their constituents call them up and saying, these people are screwing us. This has got to stop. And, I think so long as we have a system in which those people can express themselves via vote, express themselves via using public platforms like this one, then there is a chance that we can be saved from these guys. But for now, you've got this drug-addled, egomaniac, white supremacist maniac literally torching recklessly the U.S. government, and there is going to be a lot of pain. And what's more, I don't think it's a zero risk that Trump will push, as he has already tried this week, the idea of unitary executive, that he can do whatever he wants and shut down whatever spending he wants. And I don't think it's a zero possibility that the Supreme Court supports that. And if we take Trump, who already has immunity and therefore acts with impunity, and tell him he can do whatever he wants in the United States government, even though the people will ultimately put a stop to it, the pain that will be inflicted in the intervening period will grow even more immense.
You write at your Substack in a piece called The Shriek of the Fox, which is beautifully written but dark. You say, make no mistake, our government is far more dysfunctional now than it was at the time of the Civil War. There was far more consensus then about the separation of powers and the rule of law than there is now. The Confederacy sought to tear our country asunder. MAGA world is tearing our Constitution to pieces and reducing our institutions to rubble. Do you want to say more? Or should people just go read it?
You read it very well, and people can go read it. And I wrote another one overnight about the First Amendment issue that you talked about earlier. But I think people need to understand that what's happening is not politics as usual. It should not be ignored the way politics was easy to ignore in the past, because one by one, fundamental tenets on which the country was founded and fundamental institutions that protect us and give us the opportunity to express our will as the people who hold the senior most job in the government the founders conceived of, which is citizen, voter, that we're having our rights stripped away. When they say the Congress, we'll ignore what the Congress has said in terms of laws or in terms of allocation of funds, and they sideline the Congress, they're sidelining the people's representatives. They are sidelining the people. When they say that courts shouldn't be able to stop the president from doing what they're doing, they are erasing the Article 3 power that the courts have. They're getting rid of Article 1 of the Constitution. They're getting rid of Article 3 of the Constitution. They're getting rid of the First Amendment, right for free expression. They're getting rid of the 14th Amendment, the right of people to equal protection under the law. They are stripping away the right to vote, which is fundamental. They are going to make it harder and harder for people to do that. The president in the past 24 hours said, I'm taking over the Postal Service. First of all, the Postal Service is established in the Constitution. He shouldn't have the right to do that. But why is he doing that? Why is he getting rid of it? Because they want to get rid of voting by mail. And they are going to try and stop people from voting. And step by step, what is happening in this country is something we've never seen before, which is an enemy from within has taken over our government and is trying to destroy it, while he is trying to elevate our enemies from overseas in a way that is enriching him. One of the most extraordinary things that happened this week was that there was a conference in Florida, Saudi investment conference, that the president of the United States went to speak at. Okay, that's not so weird. Presidents speak at events. But what did he do there? He started touting his golf courses. He started promoting his businesses. He did it with the seal of the President of the United States projected beside him. He essentially has turned the White House into a toll booth. You want to do business in the U.S.? Pay me. Pay the president. Pay Elon Musk. Pay the people around them. This goes back to that corporate raider mentality. Not only do you have them destroying our values and our institutions, but you also have more rampant corruption concentrated in one administration than we have ever seen before by a factor of 1,000. And I include the past Trump administration. This is much more brazen. While you're sitting there, you're doing what you said, and you're at a bar, you're with your friends, you're canoeing on the lake, you're watching TV with your family, you gotta keep in mind that what is happening here is of direct personal danger to you. Your power, your rights are being stripped away. And it has never happened before in the history of the United States. Now, it may take them until Pete Dominick is dragged out of his studio and thrown into Guantanamo for them to realize how serious this is.
I would choose the Panama prison with you. I would bring you. If they were like, you could bring one person to room with you, I'd be like, Rothkopf. He'll be fun in the cell.
Oh, great. The idea of rooming with you in prison and the thoughts that you would undoubtedly have, it's really unappealing to me, Pete. I like you a lot, but I don't like you in that way.
Yeah, I don't even watch when I have access. So it's going to be that much worse, buddy.
I'm so glad we have a virtual relationship.
Thank you very much for joining it today. I appreciate you. As always, I love your insights and I love talking to you, and I'm always grateful for your time, sir. Thank you.
Same to you.
And that is what I've got for you today. David Rothkopf, give it up, everybody. Go follow him. Go click on all the links to his work and subscribe to his Substack right now. Need to know. And that's it. That's all I've got. Thank you very much for joining me. John Carroll has a new album dropping. I'll be talking with him about it later this week. Go to johncarroll.org right now to pre-order that, and support John as much as you can. That's it. That's all. I'll talk to you tomorrow, and I hope to see you at our hangout tonight. Forgot to mention that. Tonight, hangout at 8 p.m. I will see you there. Be well. Love you. Bye.
Trees, you got